The Skeleton Crew 2020 Halloween Special.
Tonight we have another one of my picks, and I'm super excited to bring Exorcist 3 to the table, which is not only an extremely strong sequel, but it's really the only sequel if you look at it from the writer-director's point of view. And the writer-director of this is William Peter Blatty, who wrote the novel for The Exorcist. He wrote the screenplay and the novel. This is based on Legion, his novel that followed up The Exorcist, and he directed it himself. And he's actually a very accomplished director. He didn't do a whole lot. He did this and The Ninth Configuration, which was based on another novel of his, but he's very good. So after we had The Exorcist in 1973, then later there was Exorcist 2, The Heretic, which... I know several people who do like it, but for the most part, it's considered a failure because it's pretty terrible. Then we have The Exorcist 3 in 1990, which is widely considered the true sequel to The Exorcist. And that is, I'm one of those people that widely considers it that.
I narrowly consider it that.
Alex, you had some information on the budgets.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, actually, the budget. So, the original Exorcist had a budget of $12 million in the 70s. It made $440 million in the box office.
Wow.
And keep that in mind, ready? So this movie comes out 15 years later, 1990, and it has a budget of $11 million. So it drops $1 million only in budget, but it is 15 years later, so, you know, inflation. And it only made $40 million. So the first one made $440 million. This made $40 million.
Well, as we all know, and people who are listening here know, one bad sequel will kill us. Can kill a franchise for the next sequel. Mm-hmm. And we've seen that happen so many times. And even if the next sequel that comes out is superior to the previous sequel, people aren't going to go see it because they were stung with the previous one. So after the utter failure of The Heretic,
Locust,
when this one came out, even though it is so much better, a lot of people didn't go see it. Now, fortunately, it did make a pretty decent profit. I mean, right. I think it's generally you do like 3 times the budget is what it takes with marketing and everything else. So you're not really making a profit until you hit 3 times the budget. But they did that, and they went over. So it did make a profit, which is good. We also have a really impressive cast for this one, including George C. Scott, who is playing Kinderman. Now, he was not the Kinderman in the original film, but I don't think it even matters. To be honest, he does such an incredible job here that you don't really dwell on that. Ed Flanders came back as Father Dyer. He played Father Dyer in the first one.
Oakley dokley.
Jason Miller came back. In this one, he's credited as Patient X, but in the first one, he was Father Karras. And if you remember how the first one ended, he took the demon into himself and then threw himself down that iconic flight of stairs. Mm-hmm. And so he's back for this one.
Spoilers.
Yeah, for the first movie. Scott Wilson is here, a very young Scott Wilson, that Walking Dead fans will look at him and go, oh my goodness. Now, he was a staple with William Peter Blatty. He was also in the Ninth Configuration. So they worked together a couple of times. Nicole Williamson as Father Morning is here, but not if you watch the director's cut. There are 2 different versions of this film. There is the theatrical version, which had a lot of fingerprints from the producers all over it. And the whole reason we have the Father Mourning bit at the end is because the producer said, whoa, 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 you can't have an Exorcist film and not have an exorcism. So they manufactured that whole bit to bring him in. But if you watch the director's cut, you get more Brad Dourif. Mm-hmm. You don't get Jason Miller, which is kind of a trade-off because I do really like the Jason Miller parts. But Brad Dourif, who is playing the Gemini killer, and this is one of my favorite performances of Brad Dourif. He is incredible in this. In the director's cut, you get a lot more of that, which I love. But you don't get the Father Mourning stuff at the end, which is fine with me because I honestly feel like it drags the film down. But that's pretty much the bare bones of what's going on here. We do have a synopsis for anyone who is not familiar, and I just lost the page, so hang on one second. Tiny. A police lieutenant uncovers more than he bargains for as his investigation of a series of murders which have all the hallmarks of the deceased Gemini serial killer leads him to question the patients of a psychiatric ward. So basically, we have a series of murders that start popping up in town, and they're reminiscent of a serial killer that is now known to be deceased. But they have all the hallmarks, including things that were not shared with the press. So it's unlikely that it's a copycat killer. So the George C. Scott character, Kinderman, starts to delve into that and discover what's really going on.
Yeah, I thought that was a really great aspect of the narrative where when he says things like, well, in the paper we said that this happened, I think, he always left a mark on this part of the body and it was really here and this instead of that and this instead of that. I thought that was really interesting because that really brings you in because it's like, oh, wow. Even though we as an audience, knew nothing about this, once you hear that the general public got this information and yet it's really this and that is what's really happening, it becomes more intriguing.
Right.
And it feels more lived in.
And I also feel like, too, this is a mystery. This isn't just, like Jamie said, there's an exorcism in the end, but it feels like, okay, we're trying to figure out what's going on here. And I really had no idea where this was going, pretty much until the guy from the first one showed up, and I was like, oh, wow, that blew my mind in itself. But trying to figure out what was going on, there was so much exposition in this movie, but I loved every second of it. Like, they kept kind of dancing around certain things, giving you clues, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe this movie's this, maybe this movie's that. Personally, I feel ashamed of myself that I let this one fly under the radar for me for so long. I know it has an iconic scene in it, but I never knew it was that good. And watching this movie and watching the plot unfold the way it did, it was literally one of the greatest mysteries for me that I've ever seen. I was like, this is so engaging, and I care about everything that these people are saying.
Right. And it's not a good thing to go on YouTube and look up big scene or scary scene of Exorcist 3. It definitely plays way better if you're actually taking the journey.
Agreed.
This is a slow burn for sure. Everything's really laid out. It's really built upon. All the characters are completely fleshed out, totally developed. Yep. Even the moments when he's talking to this dude, the Gemini killer, and he sees Father Karras and he goes, you only see what your heart sees or something like that, or, whatever. And then you start to piece together what is happening with what he's looking at compared to what's really there. Brad Dourif's acting, when he screams and starts getting enraged with the whole idea. Yeah, the amazing moments of this movie, things like we said, the classic scene where the Gemini comes out of nowhere behind the nurse, that is just wild, man. The sound design to that whole scene, the way it's shot from such a distance, and you're it's like you're trying to see what's going on, and it's and all of a sudden it just like hits you like so hard. It's just the way it was directed, and for a guy who hardly directed anything, I thought that was really impressive, the choices that were made there.
Absolutely.
I like how they added the effects to Dorff's voice when he talks to the lieutenant. I thought that was really good. As far as sound design, again, the explanation of how he took over Father Karras's body and his brain, how he fixed it or whatever, and it took 15 years, and now he's back to killing and all that. That was really interesting.
Right.
Did you guys notice that Dorff says "child's play" to the lieutenant?
Oh, he does. Nice.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
And dude, I'll agree with Jamie as well. His best performance. He is so good in this movie. It's frightening. It's like he's just an amazing actor. And I also think that because we've seen him in Halloween 2, he gives a great performance as well. And that was more recent, obviously, than this. But, man, I got to say, I'm saying it right now, Brad Dourif is underrated. Just by that performance alone,
Yeah, like people who skip this one, because, Exorcist doesn't have, the marquee value when it comes to horror fans. It's almost like...
Right.
It's almost like Children of the Corn or Poltergeist or Amityville. Like, nobody really thinks anything of the sequels. Psycho was almost there, sadly. There's some franchises that people don't put much thought into the sequels. This is definitely one of them. So this movie probably is overlooked in a big way.
Dude, and I'm so glad you said that, because when we reviewed Psycho 3 back in the day, I was guilty of the same thing, like exactly what you're talking about. I paid no attention to him because I was just like, whatever. It's just a sequel, and everybody knows the originals, obviously. But I also know what you mean, though. You get your Friday the 13th fanboys. You get all these properties. Texas Chainsaw even has a lot of them where it has his fan base. But there's also The Exorcist, your Amityville Horrors, those kind of movies that, while they're known. And I feel like they're respected for sure. It just doesn't have the same fan base. Obviously, the sequels were.
No one talks about them
as well,
right? Jamie, do you think they get the notoriety that? I don't know if I can even say that they Well, there's a lot of Exorcist spin-offs though. Like all these Emily Rose things, and then, some stuff we touched upon on the crew and stuff. We covered some Exorcism.
Well, it's pretty much impossible to do an exorcism movie without making people think of The Exorcist. You can't. You can't do it. And so I was recently talking about on the podcast Under the Stairs when we did the first part of the Wannaverse show, I was talking about how in The Conjuring, they have the exorcism scene at the end, and you can tell that James Wan clearly was trying to go as far away from the exorcist as he could by having her sitting upright in a chair versus being strapped to a bed. Because anytime you see an exorcism scene, they're typically strapped to a bed, and the first thing you're going to think of is the exorcist, and you can't get away from that. So the original film has a huge legacy. The sequels, no, not so much. And you know how Brian posts, whenever we're watching something, he always gives like a little mini review. What I discovered when we watched this film through the comments is that there are way more people than I thought who have never seen this film, who just wrote it off, who skipped it over. That breaks my heart, because if any movie deserves to be heralded, it's this one. And I'll straight up tell you, I absolutely love the original The Exorcist. It is my third favorite film of all time, right behind Jaws and Dawn of the Dead 78.
Wow.
It is unequaled. But with this film, it's damn near close. Like, it comes so close to being as good as the first one. And I honestly think this one is scarier. Mm-hmm. And the first time I saw this, I didn't actually see this in the theater. I had I missed it in the theater, and then for the same reason everybody else did, and now I feel really bad about that. But when I happened to be at a friend's house, and there were a bunch of us sleeping over, and I couldn't sleep, which is typical, so I got up in the middle of the night, and his dad had taped it off cable, and it was on VHS. So I sat in the living room with all the lights off because I didn't want to wake anyone up, right in front of the TV, and I was watching this movie, and we get to that iconic scene. It scared me so bad that I was so afraid I couldn't even go back to bed because I was too scared to walk down the hall. I didn't want to walk past any doors. Even now, when we watch this movie, if I have to go to the bathroom, Brian has to walk me to the bathroom. He's constantly making fun of me for that. I will not walk past doors. It freaks me out. And I have to turn on all the lights. I usually take an animal with me. It seriously, it really affects me because I think it's that powerful. And that's not the only scary scene in the film. There are, old ladies crawling on ceilings.
Oh my God! Right?
And just the imagery too. When the scene where he has the dream and he goes to heaven and he's talking to all the dead people, they terrify me. When he sees the little kid that got killed and they found him in the beginning.
Oh my God! Right?
His neck, his head, stitched back on, and his eyes. It just freaks me out.
That was crazy with the eyes.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So Blatty knows exactly what he's doing. He is an incredible director. And when it comes to this film, he took such care and it just shows. And Brad Dourif, oh my God, I can't even say enough about him. I could listen to him talk all day long. When he gets to the part where he's doing his little monologue, that could be an entire movie, and I would be totally happy with it. And he's terrifying. It's just everything about it is terrifying. And George C. Scott, his performance.
Oh my God!
I don't think you can say enough about him. He is fans of The Changeling.
Yep.
Will be familiar with how he emotes,
right?
And he is incredible. And to be such a big, strong guy. And, he's most notably known for playing Patton. I think that's probably his most famous role. Mm-hmm. He's a big, strong guy. No.
Patton Oswalt.
But when you see him in films where he has to be emotional, it breaks your heart. When he's trying so hard to get to his daughter.
Right. That scene, trying to get to the house, was so intense. Because you think that this nurse is just slaughtering these people at that point. You just don't know. And then it's even more creepy because he gets there and everyone's fine. So then you're really confused. And all of a sudden he goes in the next room or whatever, and the nurse is there. And then that scene just gets insanely creepy with her being there. And then seeing the reaction of everybody who was with her this whole time, who thought she was basically normal, but a little weird. And all of a sudden it goes to a whole nother level. Everything is just played. This whole, the first half is a slow burn. It really picks up with that scary scene walking down the halls past that door. Once that happens, this movie just ramps up. The exorcism scene, I know that Jamie, she has too much knowledge to enjoy it the way Dan and I might have. I don't know if you liked it, Dan, but I did. I thought it was pretty wild with the dude on the ceiling and the skin ripping off, and that's sort of when we get to that the imagery of the crucified boy with the Jesus statue on his head and the spikes through the eyes. The last 35 minutes of this movie is intense and insane.
Wild.
So it's a good juxtaposition. One of the things my favorite band is the Smashing Pumpkins, and one of the things that is the greatest aspect of that band, at least in the early days, probably it ended around 96 or so. Billy Corgan said he wanted to perfect playing slow music with heavy music. And his songs would be like that. They would be slow, just, low, slow singing, and all of a sudden,
I'm your lover, I'm your zero.
Well, not that one, but yeah. But he would do that, and it it blends beautifully together. When you could do those things, have a slow burn and have a fucking kick-ass last 35 minutes that's ramped up like this, it really takes you by surprise. And it's like a roller coaster of a movie, and it adds to that because, you know, you could put the pedal to the metal as soon as the movie starts, and you're just burned out by the time you're finishing off that second of the 3 acts, you know?
Right.
So to do it this way is the best way, and that adds to the whole experience.
I don't hate the exorcism scene. What I feel about it is that it feels unearned. I feel like it feels shoehorned in, and it's because it was. I mean, we get a couple of shots of Father mourning leading up to that, but really, and then he just walks in at the end, and you just get this like, who are you and why are you here? Like that's how I feel about it.
Right.
I don't think the scene itself is a bad scene. I just feel like it doesn't really belong. And it always felt tacked on to me and weird. And then when I realized why, I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. You know, I don't think it ruins the movie in any way, but I will say that I recommend that people watch the theatrical version and then watch the director's cut and just see which one you prefer. Because, like I said, there's a give and take. You do lose some things and you add some things, but some people may prefer this one, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that because I do think it's still a very solid film. Overall, I loved the film anyway, regardless of the ending or that part of the ending before I knew anything about it. So
when did you first discover and when did you watch the director cut?
I think I first watched the director's cut probably 5 years ago.
Okay.
It was shortly after I moved up here. So like right around 5 years ago, I think. And it was when I want to say it was because it got maybe a new Blu-ray release. And that's why. And then that's when I started digging into it. Because prior to that, I just had it on DVD and I just watched it as it was. And I didn't really do any digging. But then when I discovered that there was a director's cut, and then I started digging into it and why there were these changes and what was going on. And, you know, it's your typical producers going, we have to have an exorcism scene, which really, if you watch the director's cut, it's not as dynamic because you don't have that huge bit, but to me, it's more subtle, and I think it's stronger. But that's me because I also like the fact that we get so much more Brad Dourif. But I would recommend watching both and just seeing which one you prefer.
Well, Jamie, you said that it was more subtle. I agree with that. That whole story that he tells, and this is how it connects to the first one so brilliantly too. Right when he's falling down those stairs, there's a little gap that he could have snuck in at that perfect time, and that's how they explain everything too. And I just thought that was such a brilliant tie to the original. It made perfect sense. It didn't feel like this is another writer trying to, fit it. It felt like this was just a natural part of the story, but amped up like 1,000,000%. Like when I watch this movie, it's a mystery, and then it goes into so many different directions. You mentioned his daughter at the end, right? That almost feels like the 5th plot turn of the whole movie. You get the whole, hey, we don't know what's going on. It might be this killer. And then it's literally him possessing the guy from the first movie. And by the way, I love that. I'm not the biggest Exorcist fan, but like that connection and, he didn't have that much of a performance in it, but his performance was killer too. Like it was great. Like he played it perfectly. And like Alex said, with the voices and stuff, there was something about this movie that was really creepy. And I actually forgot about old ladies crawling on the ceilings until you mentioned it. And I was like, oh my God. And I had always seen that because of Bravo's 100 Scariest Movie Moments.
Right.
And it shows.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it shows the scissor scene, though, right? And that scene is obviously, like we said, iconic. But while they're talking about that, it also features scenes with the lady. And I was like, again, I feel ashamed now because it took me so long to watch this movie. Because Jamie, you were like reading the comments, like I was that guy. Like I completely admit it. But to speak to that as well, this is one of the best horror movies I've ever seen too. Like I agree, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe how long it's been that I just never gave this a shot, you know?
I'm glad you did.
Well, we were forced to.
Well, I'm glad I forced you.
But
it's also considered the best. A lot of people consider that one scene the best jump scare.
It is
ever.
Oh, that's okay.
And it's because of the build-up, because of the tension, and it's a slow, tensiony build, and the camera just stays back and lets you watch it. Like he doesn't, frenetically move the camera around. He doesn't try to do any crazy tricks. The camera is at the end of the hall. You're watching the entire thing play out, and it takes a while to do it. And that's because you just feel like there's a reason we're here. Something's going to happen.
Right.
And it takes its time. And that's to me, the hallmark of a good director is when he can just let it happen and just say, just hang on a minute. You guys got to hang on. Just wait,
But it pays off. It's worth that buildup. Like that's what it's about. And you said something about the camera, and I think that's it. It's the familiarity of the camera and where it is from the beginning. So we're seeing from this angle, so we almost become comfortable with this angle. And it's a long shot. It's like, okay, like why are they shooting it this way? And holy shit, does it work so brilliantly. And here's another thing, too. If you can continually scare people when they know it's coming, because more people have seen that scene more than the whole movie, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And people will still say that, like, even with it coming, and this worked for me, too, I knew it was coming. That music cue, too, whatever it is, like, oh, my God. Like, holy fucking shit. And I was like, wow. But here's the greatest thing, and as great as that scene is, this is not just for that scene. Like, this movie is so much more. It's got tons of great shit in it, and stuff that really, honestly, scared the hell out of me. Like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, wow. And then, like we said, too, add on the performances, and I'm like, am I crazy here? Like, this is a 5 out of 5. The only way that they can ruin it is if they completely drop the ball, and then they kept adding the plot points, and then you learn the connection to the first one. This was a mic drop from the jump.
Wow. Well, Dan gave his rating, so Jamie, what's your rating?
I'm so excited, Dan. That makes me so happy. It really does. It makes me so happy.
Thank you.
This is a straight up 5 for me. I don't think anybody is going to be surprised by that. This is, if I want to get scared, this is a movie that I will watch, and it works every time.
Yeah.
Yes.
The highlight for me, again, Brad Dourif saying Child's Play, and then we cut to a redhead kid. I mean, come on. If that's not if that's not fantastic filmmaking, what is?
I actually pointed that out when we watched it the last time. I pointed that out, and I was just like, that was really clever and very subtle,
Yes.
That's great. Yeah.
Love it.
Not as crazy as into it as you guys are, but it's still a very high rating, 4.5 out of 5.
Right on.
Yeah. It's just so well done. The acting, the execution. What a great job of directing for a guy who really doesn't direct anything. That is very impressive. Right. But I guess only you really know how to bring your vision to life, I guess, sometimes. And this is definitely a case. I'm better for watching this. I know I watched it a couple years ago, but I might not have been in the right headspace in my 20s or whatever, or 30s. Watching it this time, I definitely want to make this a once every 2 to 3 year rotation. I mean, really good stuff. Great compliment to The Exorcist. Definitely,
nice.
Yeah, definitely the true sequel. You could skip that Darth Vader sequel. I mean, that is horrible, dude. Now,
The Darth Vader sequel.
yeah, I don't know if they made a part 4 Exorcist, but
yeah. Well, there are two. There's actually Exorcist Dominion, I think, and then they're both prequels. They're pretty much exactly the same story as Exorcist the Beginning and then Exorcist Dominion. They're pretty much the same story. They were made, one got started being made and then they had some issues. Then they started making it again with and there are actually some cast members that are in this movie. It's really bizarre. It's really bizarre. Yep. They're not that great.
So we could stop here.
I don't think either one of them is that great, but it's really interesting to watch them side by side or, watch one after the other and just see the similarities and the differences. I like to do that. But as far as if I'm going to say I'm watching the Exorcist franchise, I'm really okay if all I watch is Exorcist and Exorcist 3 and then done. Like I'm happy with that.
Yep.
And also they made the short-lived TV show as well. That was a big hit.
Yeah, which the first season of that I think was phenomenal, and then it kind of turned into Supernatural in the second season, where it was like traveling around, performing exorcism kind of thing. And then I fell off of it in the middle of the second season, and then it got canceled. But the first season of that with Gina Davis is totally worth watching.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that twist is big. Yep.